It's a Wednesday night and you're lying in bed with your phone 6 inches from your face. You weren't planning to buy anything, you were just scrolling. But there it was, the thing you didn't know you wanted until 40 seconds ago. And now there's a little timer on the screen, and the price has a line through it, and someone in the review said it changed their life. You tap. You don't even feel it happen. The address is already saved, the card is already saved. The whole transaction takes less time than brushing your teeth. $41. You set the phone down. You're asleep within 10 minutes. You won't remember the purchase until the box shows up on your doorstep 4 days later. And even then, you'll have a brief moment of, oh, right, that thing. That moment, repeated, is the single fastest way to stay broke in 2026. Not a dramatic gambling problem. Not a catastrophic financial event. Just the steady, frictionless, barely conscious accumulation of stuff you didn't decide to buy in any meaningful sense of the word decide. Overconsumption isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It feels like nothing while it's happening. And the math behind it, when you actually run the numbers, is genuinely shocking. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what overconsumption costs, why it's engineered to be invisible, and what the real numbers look like when you stop letting them hide. Quick disclaimer before we start. None of this is financial advice. This is education about patterns. Use it as a map, not a prescription. Let's get into it. Start with the headline number because it sets the stage for everything else. According to research compiled by Don't Pay Full from Bankrate, Simplicity DX, Statista, and a dozen other sources, the average American spent $282 per month on impulse purchases, which works out to $3,381 annually. Some surveys, like the one from GetNux updated in early 2026, put the figure higher, around $314 a month. The average American makes roughly 9.75 impulse purchases per month at an average of $28.90 each. Between 84 and 89% of U.S. adults have made an impulse purchase. 62% make impulse purchases at least once a month. 48% do so online at least weekly. This is not a fringe behavior. This is the default behavior of nearly every adult in the country. Now let me show you what that headline number actually does over time, because this is where it stops being a statistic and starts being a life. $3,381 a year, the average impulse spend, invested instead at 8% average annual return, compounds to roughly $500,000 over 30 years. $500,000. That's not the cost of a yacht or a mansion. That's the cost of 9.75 small, barely remembered purchases per month. The impulse spending alone, redirected, is the difference between retiring with options and retiring with anxiety. And impulse spending is just one channel of overconsumption. It's the most visible one, but it's far from the largest. Let me walk you through the actual channels, one at a time, because each one has its own math and its own disguise. Number 1. The non-essential lifestyle spend. According to Fortunely's consumer spending research, updated through early 2026, the average U.S. consumer spends roughly $1,616 per month on non-essential purchases. Restaurants, drinks with friends, rideshare trips, subscription boxes, entertainment, the small upgrades. Across a lifetime, that figure adds up to over $1.2 million in non-essential spending. Read that number again. $1.2 million across a working life on things that are by definition not essential. This isn't the rent. This isn't the groceries. This isn't the insurance. This is the layer on top of survival. And for the average American, it totals more than $1 million over the decades. The reason this number is so shocking is that nobody experiences it as $1 million. They experience it as a $16 lunch, a $12 drink, an $8 rideshare, a $35 subscription box. The fragmentation is the disguise. $1 million spent $16 at a time doesn't feel like $1 million. It feels like Tuesday. Number 2, the subscription stack. According to research from C+R Research, updated for 2026, the average American spends roughly $219 a month on subscriptions across about 8 active services. The average American thinks they spend roughly $86. The gap between perception and reality is $133 a month. That's $1,600 a year that people are spending on services they don't even know they're paying for. The streaming services that fragmented so that the show you want is always on a platform you don't have. The app that auto-renewed after the free trial. The cloud storage you forgot about. The premium tier of something you use the free tier of anyway. The subscription model is specifically engineered around the psychology of forgetting. Companies know that the inertia of a recurring charge keeps the money flowing long after the value stops. $219 a month invested at 8% over 30 years compounds to roughly $326,000. The subscriptions you can't even name are worth $250,000 over a working life. Number 3, the food delivery and convenience channel. This one has exploded in the last several years, and it's one of the most expensive forms of overconsumption precisely because each individual transaction feels small and necessary. The meal you ordered because you were tired, the coffee you grabbed because you were running late, the convenience store snacks, the premium delivery fees stacked on top of inflated menu prices, stacked on top of service fees, stacked on top of tips. Studies consistently find that ordering food through delivery apps costs roughly 25 to 40% more than the same food purchased directly, before you even add the delivery and service fees. Someone ordering delivery 3 times a week at a $15 premium per order, just the premium, not the food itself, is spending an extra $2,300 a year on the convenience of not driving. That $2,300 invested at 8% over 25 years compounds to roughly $168,000. The convenience of not cooking, priced over a working life, costs a 6-figure sum. Let me pause here for a moment because the pattern across these first 3 channels is the entire thesis of this video. Overconsumption doesn't bankrupt people through large, memorable purchases. It bankrupts them through small, forgettable ones, repeated at a frequency the conscious mind can't track. The impulse buys, the non-essentials, the subscriptions, the convenience spending. Each individual transaction is small enough to slip beneath the threshold of attention. The aggregate is large enough to determine the entire shape of a financial life. The disguise is the fragmentation. If the full annual cost of overconsumption arrived as a single bill, almost nobody would pay it. It doesn't arrive that way. It arrives in $200 pieces, $40 pieces, $15 pieces, all year long, in forms that look like normal life instead of the slow draining of a future. Number 4, the upgrade cycle on things that already work. The phone that gets replaced every 2 years, even though the old one functioned perfectly. The laptop swapped out because the new one has a slightly better screen. The car traded in because the lease ended and starting a new lease felt normal. The TV upgraded because the resolution numbers got bigger. The furniture replaced because you got bored of looking at it. The wardrobe refreshed because the season changed. None of these upgrades were responses to something failing. They were responses to boredom, to marketing, to the existence of a newer version. The upgrade cycle is overconsumption's most socially acceptable form because it disguises itself as progress. The new iPhone every 2 years at roughly $1,200 across a 30-year working life is $48,000 in direct phone spending. That same money invested at 8% over the same window represents roughly $68,000 in foregone compound returns. And that's one device category. Stack the upgrade cycle across phones, laptops, tablets, TVs, headphones, appliances, furniture, and vehicles, and the lifetime cost of perpetual upgrading easily exceeds $300,000 in foregone wealth. The upgrades feel like improvements. The math says they're wealth destruction wearing the costume of progress. Number 5, the social media-driven purchase. This channel didn't exist in its current form 15 years ago, and it's now one of the largest. According to the impulse buying research, Americans spent an estimated $71 billion on social media-driven impulse purchases in a single 12-month period. 48% of social media users have made an impulse purchase after seeing an ad on TikTok or Instagram. 55% have purchased a product after seeing an influencer use it. The TikTok made me buy it trend has driven over 6 billion views of impulse product content. 85% of impulse shoppers make those purchases exclusively on a mobile device. The mechanism here is precise and deliberate. The platforms have removed every possible point of friction between seeing something and owning it. The ad is targeted to you specifically based on your behavior. The checkout is one tap. The payment is pre-saved. The shipping is pre-saved. The entire architecture is designed so that the gap between impulse and transaction is as close to zero as engineering can make it. The thing that protected previous generations from overconsumption wasn't superior discipline. It was friction. You had to drive to a store. You had to carry the item. You had to physically hand over money. Each step created a moment of reconsideration. Those moments have been systematically deleted. The $71 billion is what flows through the gap once the friction is gone. Number 6, the buy now, pay later trap. This one deserves its own channel because it has metastasized so quickly. Services like Affirm, Klarna, Afterpay, and the rest have made financing available for virtually any purchase, no matter how small. The pitch sounds reasonable. Split it into 4 payments. No interest if you pay on time. Easy and convenient. The reality is that these services exist because they're profitable, and they're profitable because they reliably increase spending. Research consistently shows that buy now, pay later users spend 10 to 40% more than they would paying up front. The psychological mechanism is simple. A $200 purchase feels expensive. 4 payments of $50 feels manageable. Your brain processes the smaller number and ignores the total. According to the 2025 impulse buying data, nearly 10% of impulse purchases are now made using buy now, pay later financing. People are financing impulse buys. They're taking on debt in tiny, invisible increments for purchases they didn't plan and often don't remember. Every payment plan fragments the cost further, which makes the overconsumption even harder to see, which makes it accelerate. The buy now, pay later channel doesn't just enable overconsumption. It supercharges it by removing the last remaining psychological brake, which was the discomfort of seeing the full price at once. Number 7, the retail therapy channel. According to the Gitnux research updated in early 2026, 61% of shoppers engage in what they call retail therapy to improve their mood. 61%. This is the channel where overconsumption stops being about objects and starts being about emotional regulation. The bad day at work becomes a shopping cart. The argument becomes an order. The boredom becomes a browse that becomes a purchase. The anxiety becomes a package on the way. The spending isn't really about the thing being bought. It's about the small dopamine hit of acquisition, the brief sense of control, the momentary lift. The problem is that the lift is temporary and the financial consequence is permanent. The dopamine fades within hours. The charge stays on the statement. And because the underlying emotional need was never actually addressed, the need returns, which triggers another purchase, which fades, which returns. The retail therapy channel is a loop. It's one of the most expensive loops in American financial life because it's powered by emotion rather than need, which means it has no natural ceiling. Need is finite. You can only use so many spatulas. Emotion is not finite. The bad days keep coming and the loop keeps running, and the money keeps flowing out in pursuit of a feeling that a purchase was never capable of providing in the first place. Number 8, the lifestyle creep channel. This is the slowest and most insidious form of overconsumption because it doesn't involve any single purchase decision at all. It's the gradual upward drift of your entire baseline. The raise that arrived and quietly got absorbed. The slightly nicer apartment that became normal. The grocery budget that crept up because you started buying the nicer versions of everything. The dinners out that went from occasional to routine. The vacations that got a little more elaborate each year. No single step in lifestyle creep feels like overconsumption. Each step feels earned, reasonable, deserved. But the aggregate effect is that your spending rises to consume your entire income, no matter how much that income grows. According to Goldman Sachs research, 41% of Americans earning between $300,000 and $500,000 annually report living paycheck to paycheck. 40% of those earning over $500,000 say the same. These are people whose lifestyle crept upward in perfect lockstep with their income until the gap between earning and spending closed entirely. Lifestyle creep is overconsumption that doesn't require any individual act of overconsumption. It's the cumulative result of never deciding, at any point, that your current level was enough. The income grows. The baseline grows to match. The wealth never accumulates because the gap between income and spending, where wealth is actually built, never opens. Number 9, the storage and clutter cost. This is the hidden tail of overconsumption that almost nobody accounts for. When you overconsume, the objects don't disappear, they accumulate. The average American home contains roughly 300,000 items, according to UCLA research on consumer behavior. All of those items require space. Space costs money. People who overconsume often end up in larger homes than they would otherwise need, or they rent self-storage units, or they convert functional rooms into storage for things they don't use. The U.S. self-storage industry generates tens of billions of dollars in annual revenue, and a significant portion of that revenue is people paying monthly rent to store overconsumption they've already paid for once. The object was bought, the object wasn't used. Now the object is being paid for a second time, in the form of the square footage required to house it. Overconsumption has a carrying cost, and the carrying cost compounds for as long as you keep the stuff, which for most people is years or decades. Let me run the aggregate math now, because this is the part that's genuinely shocking when you see it assembled. Take the conservative versions of each channel for an average American household. Impulse purchases at roughly $3,300 a year. Subscriptions running roughly $2,600 a year using the higher of the perception versus reality figures. Food delivery and convenience premiums at roughly $2,000 a year for a regular user. The upgrade cycle averaging roughly $2,000 a year when amortized across all device and furniture categories. Social media-driven purchases overlapping somewhat with impulse, but adding at least another $1,000 a year of distinct spending. Even if you account for overlap between these channels and discount the total significantly to avoid double counting, the realistic figure for an average household's overconsumption sits somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000 per year. Let's use $10,000 as a round middle number. $10,000 a year of overconsumption redirected into investments at 8% average annual return compounds to approximately $470,000 over 25 years. Over 30 years, it compounds to roughly $1,200,000. Over a full 40-year working life, it compounds to approximately $2,800,000. That is the actual cost of overconsumption. Not $10,000 a year, $2.8 million across a working life. The difference between the $10,000 and the $2.8 million is compound interest, which is the force that overconsumption quietly steals from you every single year you participate in it. Every dollar that flows out through the impulse buy channel, the subscription channel, the convenience channel, the upgrade channel, is a dollar that will never compound. And the compounding is where almost all the wealth actually lives. The contributions are a small fraction of the final number. The growth is the rest. Overconsumption doesn't just cost you the money you spend, it costs you everything that money would have become. Now here's the part that makes this genuinely insidious. Overconsumption is not an accident. It's not a personal failing. It's the intended output of an enormous, sophisticated, well-funded system designed specifically to produce it. Every retailer, every app, every platform, every payment processor, every advertiser is optimizing, with significant resources and considerable talent to increase the frequency and size of your purchases. The targeted ads are targeted because the targeting works. The one-tap checkout exists because friction reduces spending, and they want spending increased. The saved payment information exists for the same reason. The buy now, pay later option exists to remove the psychological break of seeing the full price. The subscription model exists because recurring revenue survives your forgetting. The notifications, the limited time offers, the countdown timers, the social proof in the reviews, the influencer placements, all of it is engineered. You are not in a fair fight. You're one person with a tired brain at the end of a long day, and on the other side is an industry that has spent decades and billions of dollars studying exactly how to get you to tap the button. This is why willpower is not the solution, and anyone who tells you it is doesn't understand the actual problem. Willpower is a finite resource that depletes throughout the day. By the time you're lying in bed scrolling on a Wednesday night, your willpower is essentially gone. The system knows this. That's why so much overconsumption happens in the evening, on mobile devices, in bed. The Capital One research found that 43% of people say they're more likely to spend impulsively while lying in bed shopping. The system has identified the exact moment your defenses are lowest, and it meets you there, every night, with infinite inventory and zero friction. Trying to win this fight through willpower alone is like trying to hold back a tide with your hands. The tide isn't impressed by your effort. What actually works is structural. You don't out-discipline the system. You restructure your environment so the system has fewer points of contact with you. You delete the shopping apps so the impulse has nowhere to land. You remove the saved payment information so every purchase requires the friction of re-entering a card number. You unsubscribe from the promotional emails so the triggers stop arriving. You turn off the notifications. You unfollow the accounts that exist primarily to make you want things. You institute a waiting period, 24 hours or longer, between wanting something and buying it, because most impulse desires evaporate within a day if they're not acted on immediately. Research consistently shows that a 24-hour waiting rule alone eliminates roughly 70% of impulse purchases. You're not relying on willpower in the moment. You're removing the moment entirely, or you're inserting enough friction that your rational brain has time to catch up to your reactive brain. The other half of the solution is awareness, and this is where overconsumption is most beatable, because the entire system depends on you not running the numbers. Overconsumption survives in the gap between what you think you spend and what you actually spend. The average American thinks they spend $86 on subscriptions and actually spends $219. That $133 gap is where the overconsumption lives. Close the gap and the overconsumption has nowhere to hide. The moment you can see, in a single number, what you actually spent across all the channels last month, the spending starts to change on its own. Not because you're forcing it, because awareness itself changes behavior. It's hard to keep tapping the button when you've seen the annual total. It's hard to keep the forgotten subscription when you've seen it listed in black and white. It's hard to order the convenience meal when you've calculated what the convenience premium compounds to over 25 years. The numbers, once visible, do most of the work. Let me give you a concrete picture of what this looks like in practice. Imagine someone we'll call Tamara, 36 years old, a marketing coordinator in Columbus, earning $68,000 a year. By every external measure, Tamara is responsible. She pays her bills on time, she has a 401k, she doesn't have any dramatic financial vices. But her savings account never grows and she can't figure out why. When Tamara finally sat down and tracked everything for 30 days, the picture assembled itself fast. $240 in food delivery, $190 in subscriptions, 4 of which she'd forgotten existed, roughly $300 in impulse purchases spread across 9 separate small transactions she barely remembered, about $160 in convenience store and coffee stops, a $90 online order triggered by an Instagram ad. The total overconsumption across those channels came to roughly $980 in a single month, just under $12,000 a year. Tamara wasn't reckless. She was average. That's the entire point. $980 a month is what average overconsumption looks like, and Tamara had been doing it for years without ever seeing it as a single number. When she ran the compound math, $12,000 a year at 8% over the 29 years until she turned 65 came out to roughly $1.1 million. Tamara had been quietly spending her way out of a seven-figure retirement, one forgettable transaction at a time, while sincerely believing she was financially responsible. She was financially responsible in the sense that she did all the visible responsible things. The overconsumption was invisible, which is exactly why it was so effective. What changed for Tamara wasn't a personality transformation. She didn't become a minimalist. She didn't take a vow of poverty. She did three structural things. She deleted 2 shopping apps and removed her saved card from the rest. She audited her subscriptions and canceled the 4 she'd forgotten, which was an immediate $48 a month recovery. She instituted a rule that anything over $30 had to sit in the cart for 24 hours before she could buy it. That was it. 3 structural changes, no willpower required in the moment, because the structure did the work. Within 3 months, her overconsumption had dropped by roughly $600 a month. She redirected that $600 into an automatic investment transfer. $600 a month from age 36 to 65 at 8% compounds to approximately $680,000. Tamara recovered most of a 7-figure retirement by changing 3 things about her environment and looking once at the real numbers. That's the whole game. Overconsumption feels unbeatable because it feels like it's about your character, your discipline, your willpower. It's not. It's about your environment and your awareness. Change the environment so the system has fewer ways to reach you. Build the awareness so the spending can't hide in the gap between perception and reality. The overconsumption doesn't survive either of those changes for long. If you watched this and recognized yourself, if you felt the discomfort of suspecting that your own overconsumption number is bigger than you'd like to know, the path forward starts with seeing the actual number. Not guessing, not estimating, seeing it assembled in one place. I built a digital product called the Financial Reset System for exactly this. It walks you through getting clear on your real numbers across every channel, finding precisely where your money is leaking, sequencing your priorities so the recovered money goes somewhere that compounds, and building a 30-day plan that turns the awareness into structure. Every number auto-calculates as you fill it in, so the gap between what you think you spend and what you actually spend closes the moment you finish. The PDF guide walks you through each step. The 30-day plan gives you weekly checkpoints. The link is in the description and in my profile if you want to take a look. The overconsumption can't survive being seen clearly. The system was the whole point. Here's the closing thought worth carrying with you. Overconsumption is the fastest way to stay broke in 2026, not because it's the largest single expense in anyone's life, but because it's the most invisible, the most frequent, and the most engineered. It doesn't feel like a financial decision. It feels like Tuesday. It feels like Wednesday night scrolling. It feels like nothing. And the feeling of nothing is precisely what makes it so expensive, because a cost you can't feel is a cost you'll never address. The system is built around that exact principle. Keep each transaction small enough to slip beneath your attention, frequent enough to add up, and frictionless enough to require no decision. And the aggregate will quietly consume the wealth that should have been yours. But the same invisibility that makes overconsumption so dangerous is also its weakness. It only works in the dark. The moment you turn the lights on, the moment you see the real number, the moment you restructure your environment so the system loses its points of contact, the whole thing loses its power. You don't have to become a different person. You don't have to white-knuckle your way through every evening. You just have to see clearly and build structure. The $2.8 million that overconsumption would otherwise take from you across a working life is not gone. It's just currently flowing through a set of channels you haven't looked at yet. Look at them, close them, redirect the flow, and the same money that was quietly making you broke starts quietly making you wealthy instead. The phone is still going to light up on Wednesday night. The timer is still going to count down. The price is still going to have a line through it. None of that is going to stop. The only thing that changes is whether there's a structure between you and the button, and whether you've seen the number that the button is actually costing you. You already know roughly what your number is. The next 30 days are where you find out exactly and decide what to do about it.